Hope you're having a great week as we continue to celebrate here on the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studios. So many people who are working in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, I want to thank you for the feedback. It's so interesting because time will pass, and I get feedback from people I don't know, but every now and then I'll hear from an old friend, and we'll chat. And turns out they listen to the show religiously, and then they'll reach out to me and either give me an idea or make a comment or say, you just talked about this person on the show as a potential guest, and they happen to be a good friend of mine, and let me introduce you to them, and so on. It's so interesting. I remember when I first started this show, Kenny Vest and a couple of others sat around the table with me, and they said, look, it's going to take time. It takes time for a show in the radio world to begin to evolve and whatever. And here we are, 1,200 conversations over 5 years into this show. And it is very interesting to see the evolution of listeners, people from all walks of life. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the feedback. We have no intention of going anywhere. In fact, we might double down. But I love when people reach out to me about helping to solve community problems, not just because of the way I might write about it or talk about it on the show, but they just want to get my point of view. And I think from the years of my being publisher and working after Katrina and being a community leader and then having the opportunity now to do this show, I'm very humble about this. I'm very humble about it. In fact, I often say that the more we learn, the more we better learn how much we don't know. And that's certainly true about a complex place like coastal Mississippi. So I'm all ears. I'm learning. I'm humble about it. And if I can play a small role to helping solve or helping bring attention to important issues in our state, then I'm going to do that. Like the seafood labeling law, for example. Somebody wrote me a note and said that the Senate committee basically gutted the House bill and put in there that they would just form a task force. So it took the teeth out of it and everything. Well, it doesn't stop there. What will happen now is that bill will go to conference, and then hopefully something with teeth will come out of it. But I really, really urge co-senators to not let this one fall to the wayside. I mean, as I've said repeatedly, bad news is coming as the testing continues. There's DNA testing that will continue and will continue to create bad headlines for coastal Mississippi. We got to be all in on this and let's do it. But issues like that are the kind that I really like to get in and offer my voice to. So thank you for the feedback. Thank you for listening. And it's Friday on the Ricky Matthews Show, so we'll start the show with my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and we'll end the show with a visit with J.T. Mitchell from SuperTalk Mississippi News. Jeff, how you doing, my friend?
Ricky, I'm doing great. I'm in full recovery mode from Mardi Gras. I think I'm finally back to 100%.
Well, you mentioned that you were going to be out and about, and we talked a little bit about Steve Gleason and what he was going to do. And, man, I posted on his site that he is living life large. He is living every day like there's more wisdom to get. What he did for Mardi Gras, Jeff, was a pure, nothing less inspiration. Unbelievable. This guy is all in like that. I mean, but you already know that.
Yeah, no, he's indomitable. That's what Drew Brees called him. I think it's a perfect word. Like nothing can take him down. And, he's diving in. Michelle and the kids ended up going, I think, after our march. We marched on Friday night in Hermes, and then they went up and did some skiing. They always get away and do a little skiing. And Steve did not let that setback. I mean, he was out in the mix every day. I was getting sightings from friends around the city with photos with Steve. Just shows you how he's still, continuing to pursue life and live it to its fullest. And you're right, inspiring is the word, because we all have problems and challenges we face every day. And to see the enormous challenges that he encounters just getting out of bed every day, and yet he doesn't let that set him back in his pursuit of life. And, that phrase, joie de vivre, that French phrase, the joy of life that kind of New Orleans encaptures, I think Steve instills that as well.
He really does. I mean, he posted a picture. You saw the post, but where he might have been overdressed, or he was overdressed, and he ended up shedding the shirt and the jacket and going shirtless, and what was literally in a parade in a neighborhood somewhere with people surrounding him. And man, it's hard to understand really what he's going through, but at the same time, his ability to live life as fully as he possibly can in that situation. 99.99999% of the people with that same condition just never get out of bed. And here is this guy just living life.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that, pre-ALS, growing up in the Pacific Northwest, used to enjoy diving into the frozen rivers, up in Washington State. He loved those ice-cold rivers and the shock it would give to your system. And he's never lost that. I mean, the ability to push himself physically and mentally is part of what keeps him going. So, I always tell people, you see him out at Jazz Fest and it's a hot day at Jazz Fest, you're worried about Steve, don't worry about him. Mentally, physically, I mean, nothing's going to overcome that guy. I've seen him push himself beyond the limit. It's pretty extraordinary.
Hey, let me tell you what I did recently, and I would really encourage listeners to go do this too. Go watch the Steve Gleason documentary, where it really captures his demise physically and the frustration of it as he was losing different aspects of his physical capabilities and how he thought about it. And you get a chance to hear from him this desire, this tenacity, this thirst for life that he has. You get to see it. You get to see it through all the frustration and sadness and heartache of the demise of the disease. But you don't get to see that expressed today because he can't communicate with us the way he normally would have, obviously. You can see it in the book that Jeff helped him write. You certainly can see it in that book. And that's why, Jeff, you said early on when the book project started, it was going to be a raw telling of his story, just like the documentary was. Of course, the documentary stops at a certain point, and the book tells the rest of the story. But what the book does is it tells us all a lesson about our own lives and how we should approach our lives. And when we think we're down, there's someone down more. We just have to look at it that way, and that will make us resilient. Because at the end of the day, the book is about human resilience in ways that few people can tell that story. Isn't that true?
Yeah, and also, Ricky, I mean, I think one of the things people think about when they think of Steve or someone with a terminal disease like Steve, they think it's sad, right? It's very sad, heartbreaking. But the book and I think the documentary, there's a lot of joy in his story. And I try to emphasize that because I think a lot of people don't even give it a chance because they think, oh, I don't want to read about that sad story. Well, there's a lot of uplifting, joyous moments in Steve's life. And I've just experienced that Friday night when he's able to take his family in a Mardi Gras parade in March in Hermes. And to be able to do that as a father, we can all relate to that as a parent trying to provide life experiences for your family. Being able to do that is so rewarding for Steve, to see Gray and Rivers and their friends out there enjoying Mardi Gras in a way that they couldn't do if they didn't have Steve as their father. And I think moments like that keep him going as well.
Listen, just a side note, and I just wanted to share this because I think it fits with the story in a way. But I had the opportunity to visit with a couple of students yesterday, high school students. Paige Roberts, who's a leader in the Jackson County Chamber, who's involved in addressing a real challenge in the community after a series of teen suicides over a couple of years. And they decided we're not going to sit back and just let this continue to happen. We're going to figure out what we can do about it. And it's been a community effort across various segments of the community. But they ultimately formed this organization called the Hope Squad. And I had two students on who joined me, and we talked about Vicky Vo from St. Martin High School here on the coast, and Jacob D'Angelo from East Central High School, and they're what is called Hope Squad members. And we talked about the power of hope, Jeff, and that people go through life, and this is true of kids and adults, that we go through life and we always assume we know what someone is going through. We always assume that, but we never know. We never know what someone is going through. And one of the things I shared at the beginning was a quote from Emily Dickinson that said, "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without words and never stops at all." Hope is incredibly powerful. And that's the thing that keeps Steve going, isn't it? This hope that he feels.
Yeah, very much. And I think that's a beautiful passage. And I think everyone should think about that. I mean, you have to find it somewhere in life. And Steve finds it in his family. And, that resource, I think, keeps him going. And he isn't slowing down, as we saw this past week. I mean, he's actually gaining momentum, I think.
Yeah, there's no doubt. If you haven't read the book, please look it up. Watch the documentary. You'll be glad you did. Okay, when we come back on the other side, we'll get the latest from the Saints. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune with us. He's written a number of books. He wrote the definitive book on Sean Payton and Drew Brees. He's written books about the Saints. He's writing a book now about Super Bowls in New Orleans, and he wrote the book with Steve Gleason about his life. Hey, Jeff, before we move away from it, I want you to tell the story you just told me during the break, because that just shows how Steve is touching people.
Yeah, it was a pretty special moment on the Toth Parade on Sunday morning, which goes really right by my front doorstep. So I always have open house. Our whole block has a party, Ricky. It's really a great parade. It's one of the longest parades. But I had a friend that was riding on a float, so I wanted to go to the other side of the road, to the side he was on. And while I was standing there, I was wearing my Team Gleason hat. And the guy next to me asked me where I got that hat. And I said, well, I know the people in Team Gleason pretty well. And anyway, he said, Steve Gleason is my idol in life. He said, I've worshiped this guy my whole life. I climbed Machu Picchu with my wife and wore a Team Gleason shirt during it. I mean, he's like the guy I look up to most in life. And was just going on and on, showing me photos on his phone of him at Saints games wearing his 37 jersey, and he was a doctor from Orlando. He wasn't even from New Orleans, but he comes in every year, brings his family. And I told him to wait here. And I went right across the street to my house, and I got a copy of A Life Impossible and stamped it with Steve's signature and signed it and gave it to him. And he was so emotional in the moment that he started tearing up and crying and went to his wife, who was standing behind us, and showed her the book. And it was just a great, really organic moment, and it really testifies to Steve's impact. This is a guy who's from Orlando, Florida, but he's followed Steve's story. He's in the healthcare profession, obviously, so he's aware of ALS and its challenges, but he's inspired by him to this day. And it was just a really cool moment to be able to share something like that with him, and he said it made his Mardi Gras.
Thanks for sharing that story, man. It tells a lot about you, too. And, you said that as a result of that book project, you'll never be the same again. And your life's so much better because of your relationship with Steve. Okay, so let's get back over to the Saints. Man, it's been a lot of conversations. They've made a few more moves in terms of the coaching staff. Kind of, just assess what you think about, the hiring that they're doing and kind of where they are right now.
Well, I think they're pretty much at the end of the hiring phase. They got such a late start. And, the most recent addition of Scott Linehan, I think, makes a lot of sense. Scott Linehan's a veteran coach who's coached a lot of different stops in the NFL as a head coach. And I think Kellen Moore needs someone like that as almost like a consigliere on the staff. He's got such a young staff that I think having a guy with head coaching experience in his background will be important for him. So that made a lot of sense to me to bring in Linehan. And I think now they're pretty much into the player roster assessment phase, getting ready for the start of free agency. We've already seen them make some moves. They just released Jamal Williams. I don't think that was a surprise to anyone. I think there's going to be more moves like that coming up as they try to get under the cap, as they always have to do, and prepare themselves for the start of free agency. So if they do want to be buyers, which it sounds like they would like to try to add some pieces, they've got a lot of work to do contractually with the salary cap to get in position to do that.
Well, there's been a lot said about Jamal Williams. I think generally thinking about him, he was kind of a bust for the Saints. He never produced the way they hoped he would. We needed a number two. He never really became that. And he also was a big impact on the salary cap. I mean, it was, I think based on the kind of contract they gave him, they expected him to do a hell of a lot more than he did.
Yeah, again, this goes back to some of the decisions that have been made in the last few years that you just have to question. If you're a Saints fan, the vision, of the plan. And I'm worried a little bit that, it reminds me a little bit of the Dell Demps years with the Pelicans when he was the general manager. And it feels like you were going year to year, just trying to patch things up in the offseason to try and get the best shape you could be that offseason to try and compete that year. And there was really no long-term vision or plan in place. It feels a little like that to me right now. And that certainly was one of those signings. I mean, I always felt like, Ricky, if the Detroit Lions and Dan Campbell, guys I really respect a lot, if they're moving on after he just scored 17 touchdowns, they see something that lets you know that they don't think he's the answer. And for the Saints have been doing a lot of that lately, picking up guys that other people cast off, and it hasn't worked out very well.
Well, you recently wrote a column. The headline was "Forget the Carr Commitment. The Saints' future depends on their after Derek plan." I mean, that's pretty evident, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I think my point is, like, everyone's caught up in whether he's going to be here this year or not. That gets to my point. You have to have a long-term plan here, and that's the most important position on the team. It's the most important position in sports. It's the number one thing they need to be figuring out is how they can address their quarterback position long-term. Whether Derek Carr is here this year or not, they still have the same problem. They have no long-term answer at the quarterback position, at least as far as we know. So I think that was important to point out. And also I pointed out in there, Ricky, it's similar to what we were just talking about. I mean, where was the plan and the vision at quarterback? They first were going to go for Deshaun Watson, and they were really lucky that they got outbid for him because that's been a complete disaster in Cleveland. And then the backup plan was Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston, and then they went to Derek Carr. I just don't see a lot of creativity or really, quarterback evaluation acumen right now coming out of the building. And that should be concerning for everyone that follows the team.
Hey, one of the things that I captured, I wanted to watch it, is the combine when the quarterbacks were throwing and some of the other work that quarterbacks were doing. Because there's been a lot of discussion about this not being a great class coming out of college this year. And I wanted to watch how that evaluation process goes. And you watch it go through. Man, listen, there's not a lot of margin for error for those quarterbacks during that evaluation. Man, they've got it down to a science. They know what kind of throws they're looking for, the conversations that they're having with these guys. They're off the field, mental assessment and leadership assessment and ability to, assessing their ability to think about defenses and all this. Man, you can't have a softness today, can you, man? Because they will figure it out fast.
Right, and it's going to continue on through this next phase, which is kind of the pro day phase where players are making official visits as well. Yeah, they're going to poke and prod you mentally and physically to test you, especially at that position. I mean, it's such a leadership position. You have to be able to lead a group of men at that spot. You're basically a CEO. And I mean, I always go back to I think it's the 10 Commandments of quarterback play that Bill Parcells put out. And one of the things he always said was have fun with your teammates and everything, but don't be a clown, right? And sometimes I think we see some guys in the NFL that don't have that makeup, right? They're a little too lighthearted, can't lead. You have to be a leader. And Drew Brees was the ultimate leader. And I think the Saints are finding out how difficult it is to replace a Hall of Fame quarterback like that. It's not easy. You get one of those guys once a generation, and they're swimming in circles right now trying to find another.
Well, it was interesting. It's interesting to see, going into the combine, who they thought would be high up. I mean, listen, Dart. I mean, he's come on strong. He had a good Senior Bowl. He has played well He's done well in the combines. His stock has gone up, but it's interesting what we thought would be, and this is going to change again, I'm sure, as we move toward the draft. but there's a constant kind of shuffling of the deck as more data becomes available.
Yeah, and this is the time of year where they call it the silly season a little bit. I mean, I can still remember plain as day when Zach Wilson came out of Brigham Young, and he had a big arm a few years ago, and there was all these videos on social media of him making these long passes, kind of like Anthony Richardson out of Florida. And we see both those guys really have struggled in the NFL. It's not about throwing the ball 60 yards in the air. There's so much more to quarterback play than that. And I find that's what sells, though, on social media is a wow throw. And really, it's just one very small facet of playing quarterback. So I try to tune out a lot of the stuff I hear right this time of year, because I think the quarterback position is very difficult to evaluate.
Listen, Jeff, your team has done a great job of covering this from every angle. One of the clear realities is that it's going to be interesting to watch because you're going to see big changes on the offensive side of the ball. You got a whole new defense that's going to be coming along. In fact, Luke Johnson on your staff wrote a column about what are some of the draft prospects that would be fit in well to this new defense. But the change dynamics are very significant, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think it's refreshing for Saints fans, right? I mean, we're kind of in that mode for almost 2 decades, Ricky, of the Sean Payton era, Dennis Allen, the same kind of style of play on both sides of the ball. And I think that's why people embraced last year Clint Kubiak coming in. At least they had a different offense. And I think this year you're going to have different offense and defense. So at least it's something new and exciting to follow. And so that's why I think fans are excited, even though they know this might be a big challenge for them. At least it's something refreshing and new and different from the past.
Well, I look forward to staying in touch with you during this offseason. It's going to be super dynamic. And until next week, I appreciate you joining me, my friend.
Yeah, we'll get rolling next week with a lot of different moves on the depth chart as they get ready to brace for free agency. It's going to be an active season, I think.
Woo! It's going to be amazing. Okay, Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com of the Times-Picayune. Thanks for joining us. When we come back on the other side, JT Mitchell from SuperTalk Mississippi News will be joining me. We'll see you after this.